and also the trade, the production for the inputs, all that done by private sector. If we look at the Qatar food security strategy, it's depend on 4 pillars. Actually, the first is the domestic self-sufficiency for the crop that can be produced in Qatar to meet the availability, which is the component of food security definition. And that domestic self-sufficiency is totally done by private sector. It is very important to facilitate all the enablers from the government to support the private sector to continue their production and business. Also, if we look at the strategic reserve here in Qatar, we are actually implement a very unique system so that the strategic reserve would support and financed by government, but the implementation we left it for the private sector. So we know that for each commodity there is a trader here. They are familiar with that commodity, and also for the rotation, it's easy for the private sector to run it instead of the government and have the traditional, conventional system that the government can store the commodity for a long time and then they resell it, and this is really very costly. So we had our system here to cooperate with the private sector, so the private sector can store the commodity for the period that has been decided or suggested by the strategy for example, rice, wheat, edible oil, other commodity for 6 months. So the government supported private sector financially to store that quantity for 6 months for the whole population and left it for private sector to do the rotation. It's a dynamics strategic reserve, so that there is in and out, so that make it more efficient and low cost on the government. So also for international, the third pillar is international trade and logistics, and also the role of private sector is very essential and critical. So as you know, Qatar with a limited nature resources, especially the water and land, we are depending on importing for most of our commodity, which can be stored for a good period. So the role of private sector is, as what I said, is very important. So we are depending on importing. So the government try to encourage and help the private sector also with regulation and developing the system for importing commodity from outside. Also for the domestic market, which is very important in order to have a good product from the producer or from the importer to the consumer with good quality and good price. So also here the private sector playing a very important role. As I said, for the international trade, yes, there is some critical perishables where we needed to be important regularly. And this is the private sector is very important to play a role here. And also for a critical non-perishable where we need to store it for a certain period, which is what I said, 6 months. So also imported and keep it in Qatar and do the rotation and handling for that. This is done by the private sector. For the domestic production, we can see here, it's the second pillar of our strategy. We met, for example, in fresh dairy, 100%, and that was because of the support of the government and a good role of the private sector. We had 100% self-sufficiency. If we look at the poultry also, we almost 100% for fresh fish, for almost 80%, vegetable at 46%, and for the red meat 20%, and we are targeting this year to reach 30%, and also for poultry eggs is about 50%, and we have some projects with the private sector in the pipeline, which is we expecting by this year to reach the 70%. So here it's clear the role of the private sector in our local production and also for our strategy. And we can see the products, the local product with high quality, which is really because of the high efficient work with the private sector. Also, one picture of our local production for vegetables, for also reserving our natural resource. We are encouraging private sector to produce the animal feed by using the recycled water, and we release the project, and there is a good really participation from the private sector. Also, in order to utilize the waste coming from animal manure, that we also release a project for the private sector to produce the organic fertilizer. For strategic reserve, as what I said, we have a system with private sector to run our strategic reserve, and also we have a project in Hamad Port for a huge quantity to be stored there that can serve our food system in Qatar, and also as a hub that can help also our economy, and that is going to be operated by private sector. It's already finished the construction. We are now in the process for tendering this project or this facility to private sector. Here our monitoring for the strategic reserve with the private sector, so that we can, yes, we left it for them to store it, but under our supervision, so that we can know what the quantity they are linked with us. So we are on the daily basis, we are monitoring the strategic reserve for the private sector. The domestic market, as you can see, we have a good achievement as what we saw in the previous slide, that we have an enough percentage of self-sufficiency, and we're still targeting the percentage to be achieved. Here also the fish market center has been developed in order to help the private sector to run their business in the good and efficiency way. Also, we have Mahasil. It's a company that really help the farmer to reach the market with high quality products. Also, we gave the private sector access directly to the consumer through the yard, which is it's 5 yards for to sell their products directly to the consumer. Thank you for your attention, and we are happy to receive any question.
شكرا دكتور مسعود. والآن لدينا فقرة للأسئلة. إذا كان في أحدكم عنده أي سؤال فليتفضل.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Masood. Thank you for this very interesting presentations. I have two brief questions. In your private sector, how much do you distinguish between large companies and small companies which need to be supported in your region? The second one is, how much with the government, the private sector is really caring about awareness raising of the population when it comes to sustainable nutrition? Thank you.
Thank you. This is really very important. Actually, there is a criteria with our, for example, we have our agriculture affairs department. They classified the farms based on the size and their production and their ability really to reach the market. So when we established Mahasil company, the purpose was for the small farmers, where they need actually a support to reach the market because they face the problem of having a good quality because they are just focusing on the production, but the lack of experience of marketing. And also in order, since we have an open market, there is a good product that's coming from outside. And also in order to meet our strategy and the component of food security definition, the safety and the quality is very important. So in order to meet both, having our local production as a safety valve, because especially for the perishable, you can depend on the imported. And we realized that after Corona, and also, what is happening now in the conflict between Russia and. So in this case, in order to protect our local producer, we give the priority for the small farmers, and the Agriculture Affairs Department have a criteria of classifying a small producer and small company who need the support from government. Yes, this is for the first question. For the awareness for the nutrition, now we are working on our new strategy from 2023 up to 2030. Since our current strategy, this is the last year. So we are considering this and still under the development for the new strategy, which is going to be ready by March this year. And it's going to be available for all, government and private sector and also public.
Shukran. Dr. Saud, just a very quick question. How much R&D is being put in the local production, i.e. relationship between universities, research center, and private sector in Qatar? So yes, to have a sustainable, system of production.
Exactly. Yes, actually, one of the pillars which